The ego is the system that runs your sense of self. It is made out of thought patterns, emotions, and behavior loops, and the stories that try to hold it all together. Left unchecked, it creates endless existential searching, chronic disconnection, and the persistent sense that something is wrong. The goal of my videos is clarity, to see your identity and its contradictions for what they are, named precisely, to finally understand what it is that we're all running away from. Saying the truth is such a loaded term. It's almost as corrupted now as the word God is, because it has been used and abused by society to no end. I mean, the President of the United States of America has a platform called Truth Social, where all he does is lie and try to manipulate. And this is actually a prime example of how reality and truth is hidden by design. When you are a seeker, you're looking for truth more than anything else. I know that for me, it was my life's obsession to finally know what is objective truth, to be able to know it with certainty. And for most people, it's likely not understandable how one can care so deeply about what is true. Everybody kind of does care about it, at least in some superficial way, but to be so obsessive about it and doubt endlessly is, very coded for philosophers and spiritual seekers. So it can be very frustrating to figure out that we don't really see what is true, but we are constantly deceived by our perceptions. We are always seeing a distortion of reality. I wanted to know what objective reality is and be certain of it. But how can you be certain of anything if everything is based on perception? Because it seems like that there is no truth that everybody can just agree on, because we all have a different perspective. And through these different perspectives of reality, we are constantly witnessing that they are lying to us all the time, because everybody has their own perception, things clearly disagree with each other, and people cannot really come to terms with what is reality in the first place. We cannot even perceive what consciousness is, for that matter. And from this point of view, you might start to believe that everything is subjective and truth was always a lie. But this is a fatal mistake. This is not true. The problem is that you do not see reality directly, but you see a nervous system filter and an ego interface towards reality. And then society, ideology, spirituality, algorithms, and your own sense of identity all fight to shape that interface. But this doesn't mean that there isn't something that you're receiving that is true from outside that interface. There are infinite things that are true. The thing of being a seeker is that you're not looking for any kind of truth. Like, I can tell you right now that you are breathing, and I can tell you that there is a sun in the sky, and I can tell you that whenever you wake up in the morning, your cortisol spikes. And these are random facts that are all true, but it isn't like the ultimate truth that seekers are after, that people who are into philosophy are after. It's like, but this is all perceived through, senses, but it's not what is behind the thing. So what a seeker asks is not some truth, but like a way you can know truth that is undeniable. And this might also include a grand theory of everything, or understanding the nature of consciousness, and why you exist, and why are you and not another person, or what happens after death. All these questions that a lot of people feel like they can never know the answer, but there's still this yearning for an answer. Now, this entire dynamic with me and you here in this video is a bit awkward, because what is my role in this video? Am I some bringer of truth here? Because subconsciously there are immediately a few power dynamics going on between you and me, depending on how many times you have seen me and what you know about the way I think and how I approach these different topics. Because for most people, if they are going to get some lecture about a random guy about what the nature of truth is, then the ego gives a bunch of psychological defenses, because you're not just going to take everything that I say at my word, right? Like you are having your own reality model and are already filtering and listening through that reality model to see if what I say makes any sense. You are also likely, if you don't know me at all, trying to figure out my sense of ego, my sense of identity. Where am I coming from with all of this? And how big is my own hubris, especially if I talk so confidently about all of this stuff? How much am I tethered into my own reality model, and how much am I close-minded and cannot include other people's view of things? For example, if you are an atheist and I start to throw words around like God, then you immediately will put me into a bucket that makes everything that I say afterwards irrelevant or less important, because, well, I'm one of those religious people who are like ungrounded from reality and doesn't really know science and biology. Or I'm an atheist and tell you the biological reality of things and that we are ultimately our bodies. And then your spiritual alarms start to turn on and say this guy doesn't know the true nature of the being and he's just, locked into a materialistic, skeptical framework. So the mind obfuscates reality exactly like this, first and foremost. It compares and contrasts viewpoints and orients other people's viewpoints into your own, like in your own reality model. So you don't actually listen for what is true without any filters, because this would be very energy inefficient, especially when there's so much deception and misinformation everywhere. So you're already, before you even engage with the data comes already filtered and changed. Now, the more you have thoughts while you engage with this video or other people about yourself in your own place in the world, the stronger this filter is going to be, because the more unsure your own belief systems are around whatever new information is going to come into place. If you're uncertain about your own belief systems, and then you hear a guy talk about some, the true nature of the universe or whatever, you either will react very defensively and, either click off or don't really engage deeply, try to find a way how to argue against what the other person is saying, or you're actually going to drop all defenses and listen with, agnostic ears, where you can maybe recognize something that is true and other things that kind of just fly by because they don't really register in your own reality model. If you reflect about your own sense of awareness, then you might say, okay, objectively looking at this, right? Like I'm perceiving my own sense data. I have eyes, I have ears, I have a mind that thinks, I can touch, I can taste. So there's a very tempting line of thought that says, okay, if everything is just perception, then is any of this real? Can I ever be certain that any of my sense data actually comes down unfiltered? Because isn't everything that my mind does already kind of like a filter? So when somebody else comes and tells you he knows something or has some true way of looking at things, then it must be an illusion or it must be full of shit, because you cannot perceive the truth. You can only perceive it through the sense data. That's a big narrative that goes on within the mind. So then you can be skeptical of everything, doubt everything, and never actually let your reality model shift or change, because everything that could possibly shift or change you is reason for doubt. It's actually born out of a higher intelligence, because you're not gullibly accepting everything, but you're also now having an immense defense mechanism for new information, because if new information enters the system, then you can always doubt it. And as long as you kind of are uncertain about something, like if you're like, maybe I could do this or I couldn't do this. Maybe this is the case or it's not the case. It kind of feigns ignorance, so you don't actually have to take a position or don't actually have to be transformed by what you hear. It's also another way that you can, filter out what is true by never actually committing to what you're seeing, never actually taking it too seriously, and then kind of just floating at the sidelines. So if you never have asked yourself, though, if all your senses and all your perception is fake, you've never actually truly questioned the foundational nature of things, then I regret to inform you that your senses have deceived you. Because if you are not aware of how much your own mind is constructing everything, then it is very easy to be deceived left and right. Because your mind cares for survival first and foremost, right? That's the biological explanation of why all of this is the case. So we must be honest with ourselves and admit what the brain is doing outside of any philosophy or psychology or metaphysics or spirituality. It's just a fact that the brain creates an internal world simulation of the perceived external world. If you go outside and look at the world, your brain is rendering in an incredible speed a 3D reality model of your environment. The sizes of the objects around you, the sense of distance, your sense of time and speed, all of these are a consequence of your internal world simulation, and it is very unique to your human architecture. Other animals might perceive, or like we know they perceive reality very, very differently from ours. Like elephants can smell water from like miles away. How would that be like, right? So even if you know that your senses are making up the reality that you are perceiving right now, it is often shocking to which extent this is happening all the time. Just from the pure rendering of your conscious awareness, the way your brain renders the visual cortex, the way you immediately understand each word that I say out of my mouth, just like so intuitively, which is also kind of ground for deception, but I'll mention this later again. But on exotic states of consciousness, you might perceive objects, for example, 10 times bigger, but it's not just the visual field that makes you perceive things bigger, but it feels like that there's some structure about your own perception that has shifted to a foundational degree. And this is something that is very difficult to communicate for anybody who hasn't had very exotic states of consciousness, because then this kind of, it feels kind of arbitrary. Like it's very easy to dismiss near-death experiences, psychedelic experiences, meditation experiences as just kind of hallucinations of the mind, when it is too extraordinary for somebody to comprehend. But for the person who has gone through the experience, it's very obvious then that, well, okay, then you are also a hallucination of my mind, because if I can have an hallucination that feels more real than my normal reality, this also kind of happens through lucid dreaming, or can happen through lucid dreaming. If my brain is capable of creating such vivid hallucinations and I sense a sense of qualia that makes everything realer than my normal life, then it puts everything into perspective as kind of illusionary. So another example of this is like how you might go to the bathroom and look at the toilet, and the way you're perceiving the physical shape of the toilet is already filtered by the fact that you know it is a toilet and what it is used for. So there are like a bunch of associations of like maybe disgust, maybe relief, maybe safety, maybe cleanliness, maybe all the toilet experiences that you've had in your lifetime evaluated in the snap of a second. And then through psychedelic experiences or another exotic state of consciousness, all these filters get just like stripped away. And now you're like coming in contact with the raw geometry of the object. Like I've had this experience, and the sense is that the raw geometry of the object is how the toilet was actually always like, but you could not see it because of how filtered everything was by your senses. And this is happening across the board with every object that you even see. Like the usefulness of the object is already entrenched in your qualia perception of it. So this becomes extremely relevant and extremely important in social dynamics, because the same we do in all social dynamics with the perceptions that we have of other people, the perception that we have of ourselves in the relationship to other people, and the associations we have with words that people use. Like if I were to talk about God in this video, or if I were to present myself as a materialist atheist, right? It changes how everything comes through the filter. So every little argument that you've had with another person, and every little story about your own identity in this world, reinforces a self-view. That's just how you think you are and how you think you're perceived. And oftentimes people get a bit startled when they hear themselves in an audio recording or they see themselves on video. It's just like, that's me, that's how I look like, that's how I sound like. Because there's a huge mismatch in what other people see of us and how we see ourselves. And even in some like objective term, if you were to film yourself, you are not perceiving yourself accurately. Like you have some sort of abstract vision. And if you get too self-conscious about this, then you get social anxiety. then you're always trying to monitor how you behave because you're trying to form yourself into some sort of a vision of how you should be like, which is extremely uncomfortable and also comes across as very inauthentic. So we cannot fathom how individual, specific, and unique all lines of our perception or deception are. They are constructed through our own little universe throughout a lifetime. So there comes like a time where you can look from your own point of view and determine with absolute certainty that nothing you've ever perceived is quite real. And that all what you thought is you was always a facade that you played off for your own survival. So then the question becomes, okay, if everything that I perceive is somehow like this filtered perception game trying to convince me of this reality model that I've constructed for myself, then what does it mean for me to be authentic and express my authentic self? And what does it mean for me to express my inauthentic self? How do I know I'm in contact with truth and reality? And how do I know that I'm deceiving myself? I have to say that it is very individual, but I can give specific or like general overviews of what it means to come in contact with your authentic self and what is actually real from my own experience, of course, of coaching people and thinking about this stuff for the last 15 years of my life. So for most people, there comes this crucial point where they realize that it all has been fake, and that everything that they thought was true is like a giant perception of their mind. And this kind of makes you feel like that your own worldview isn't really real. And it can give you the sense that you are having a deep spiritual insight about how things function while also becoming very dysfunctional. Because your 3D rendering model starts to glitch. And then you see how entrenched and interconnected it all was. Because it wasn't just that you were pretending to be somebody that you aren't around other people, but that you were rendering reality also in a way that, was there to deceive yourself and other people of who you are. So now you recognize, wait, I'm pretending to be this person, but I actually don't like the guy, or I don't actually like my life. And now when this starts to like break apart, the 3D rendering model of your internal world simulation starts to glitch. Suddenly you might sense you're disappearing into your own mind, or reality becomes surreal and everything seems kind of fake, or you're constantly confused about your sense of time and who you are right now and how you can like find your own identity again when everything kind of just feels so disconnected from truth, because everything feels so made up in your own brain. All the arguments that you had, all the stress that you caused yourself, all this drama, all of it now seems kind of stupid. And you might feel like you don't really exist in the same space that other people do. So you cannot trust your own sense organs anymore because all of them seem like a sort of reality simulation. When you feel disconnected from yourself, you're usually on the verge of some deep transformational stuff. Like it might feel like you completely lost yourself and you're very much in the gutter. But in actuality, you're making progress because you have deconstructed whatever was deceiving you to like a large extent, or like a crucial component of your identity structure has now broken apart. And this gives you the opportunity to rebuild something new and actually rediscover yourself, although it might feel very awful in the moment. And what makes it so awful is that the sense of meaning is actually being deconstructed. What all of this stuff was about is about the sense of orientation towards the meaning and what is important to perceive. And a lot of the stuff that we think is so important to be perceived isn't important. And it's exactly this false sense of meaning that is causing all of this deception in the first place. Because if you don't really care about how you're being perceived, and if you don't really care about what reality is actually like, then there's no need to deceive yourself about it. And if you see why you actually cared so much about the nature of reality, or cared so much about the nature of existence, or cared so much about being a prestigious person or seen as an intelligent person, then if the need for this is seen also as deception or also as an illusion, then you start to break down your epistemology, like the way you thought you can know things, and this is a sort of shock. So your meaning-making system in your own internal world simulation breaks apart, and now nothing has like a hierarchy anymore. You cannot really know what is more important or less important, and even the distinction between truth and falsehood starts to kind of disappear, because everything might as well be false. The real insight is that you do not see what is the case, but you see your nervous system, psychological identity interface interpretation of reality. And because you can't exactly know everything just through your senses, and you can deceive your senses through egoic meaning making, and everything that you perceive is always partial, like not fully the thing, then this is why the ego turns to deception in order to give you a sense of security. So you are always perceiving just a part of reality, and this is very uncertain and uncomfortable. So you create a story in your head and a meaning-making system that makes you feel like that you know enough, and therefore things are solid and predictable, and you know who you are, despite this feeling that there's always more that you want. So if you can't be certain, then you're going to pretend that you are certain. Or if you don't like what is happening, you can also use this partial truth to deny the whole thing and say that you don't know what is happening. People feign ignorance all the time. You can recognize that you don't know the entire thing, the entire truth, and then dismiss all truth and not do what you should do or not take responsibility. Or you can pretend that you know the entire truth and dismiss everyone else and then assert dominance and arrogance over everybody. This usually happens on the layer of egoic insecurities, the need for status and survival and desire. And then it actually doesn't, like your perception doesn't orient around truth at all anymore. It orients around what will fulfill this desire, what will fulfill my sense of status, what will avoid my sense of insecurity. And then truth is being perceived immediately at what serves this function. And it happens over many environmental mistakes, you might say, where you just feel forced to behave in a way that is needy or reinforces anxiety or makes you look bad. And from there you get these conditions that tell you if you don't deceive either yourself or others, you're going to die. You are not going to survive the situation, be it social or actually physical. So the sense is sort of accepted deception that then becomes what the truth is. And if you are very identified with that thing, then starting to notice that this isn't the truth is very traumatizing, because your entire reality model is who you are. And now you are a lie. You are not authentic. You're not truthful. You have deceived yourself into this character in order to have this perspective. So the ego turns partial perception into identity, and then this identity becomes reality. And it does not merely perceive the world for all of these survival mechanics and all of the stuff, but it perceives it also so that it can avoid emotional work, because we are learned to manipulate each other in the societal interface, and we're doing it a ton now with media, ideologies, just advertising algorithms, politics, spirituality, and it's actually always to manage our own emotions, because our emotions reveal to us what we are actually hiding from ourselves, where we are deceiving each other. So instead of engaging with our own emotions in like this introspective way, we are trying to trigger emotions in other people in order to reinforce that our reality model is right. Because if they are emotional and reactive, then I can draw this separation between me and other people, and I don't actually have to feel my own emotions, but I can just look at how I can cause negative or just reactions out of other people. So I can feel in control of myself. I can make it so that my reality model stays consistent, and I constantly keep poking at other people. If you're very ideologically motivated, then it's very difficult to come out of this, because it gives you so much sense of identity to be in this loop. So we learn to manipulate this perceptual interface. And this is why we are creating a society that doesn't believe in truth anymore, because we are constantly gaslighting each other to no extent. And with this, we are also gaslighting ourselves. Now, you might wonder, why does reality function this way? Or better, why do humans function this way? And the biological explanation is, of course, survival, and not just for truth. But the ego identity is the social survival mechanism, you might say. But there's also a deeper way to look at this, with how reality is structured in of itself, and kind of making it so that all deception is kind of by design. All that reality is really doing is it's embodying perceptions. Points of view are being held to see what it's like from a particular perspective. So I'm a human and I have a human perspective, but my human perspective is also very, very unique to me, because I am Marco. I have my own life experiences. So my lens is very unique to all that I've perceived before. And this is true for each animal, and it is true for each form of being, whatever weird forms of being might exist in this multiverse. So you're fully yourself at all times. And in this weird meta way, you cannot be not yourself. Like you're always authentic in some meta way, because it's not possible for you to be anything but yourself. So the limited nature of perception shows you two things that are actually true, and you can verify them for yourself. And it's first, that you can't know anything that is outside your perception. And secondly, you can know exactly what is inside your own perception. This means that yes, you can't really know what is true in some ultimate sense behind the veil of your own senses. Any sense of metaphysical truth or ultimate nature of reality is kind of always, or for many people at least, how they understand it, is often grasping to something outside of the self. Like in your own reality model, you're creating a metaphysical projection about some externality that then becomes real, through this perception. But it's kind of deceiving, because, you're still operating within your own reality model. You do not escape it. This means you can look at your mind and notice, well, as much as I might be deceiving myself in the creation of meaning and the way I look at the world, I can be absolutely certain that I am constructing an internal reality model. So every 3D rendering you do from your environment to the arguments you have in your head, they 100%, with trillions in undeniable certainty, what you're perceiving as qualia is true. Your senses are actually happening. This doesn't mean that the content or egoic narrative is true. Like, just because you had an argument and you think you're right doesn't mean that you're actually right about it, but you can be certain that you're having an argument. So you're perceiving something that is real. If not, you weren't perceiving it. So whatever is the case. If you can recognize yourself breathing, then you know you're breathing. If you can hear yourself think, you know that you're thinking. You might not know if the content or the logic or the meaning of your thoughts are true, but you can be certain they are there. This is very important to recognize, because this means you can perceive truth. You can perceive reality. You're not having some sort of hidden veil behind your perception that you can't ever reach, but you are immediately, 100%, intimately interfacing with reality. What a stone looks like without human perception is not possible for you to know while being human. But you know what a stone is when you see it. You know what wetness feels like when it touches you. All qualia sensations have this weird nature of being exactly where they are and being known exactly where they are, and they are objectively there. That's why perception is true. And what the mind then does is it doubts what it perceives. It creates the overlay of everything being an illusion, everything being a hallucination of the mind, everything being just an internal reality model. And this is where things get paradoxical. Because if you agree that you can't know anything outside of your perception, but you know exactly everything you perceive at its face value, like if you feel heat, you know what heat is like in the moment, then you find yourself in this odd loop where anything you could possibly know in any given moment in time is always known by you. So from this point of view, you are always omniscient. You always know everything you could possibly know from your own vantage point. Now, that's not the same type of omniscience as like a god that truly knows all the configurations of the universe at the same time and is experiencing them in the same time. But if you take your own locality of awareness, like where you are experiencing things, and take it seriously and say that this is like a reality model that, the universe has constructed in this time and space for you as a person, then exactly what you are is exactly what you are. Exactly what you're living is exactly what you're living. And what you're perceiving is exactly what you're perceiving. There's no outside of it. There's no way to contradict it because you are it. Right now, every little aspect of your own life is being rendered as reality. It is true, and that's why you're real and that's why you exist. It's radically more efficient to render your own internal reality model without all this endless doubt and confusion and existential seeking and these layers of self-inflicted deception that tell you that you need to prove yourself to other people, to prove to others that you exist, to prove to others that you're real, to prove to others that your limited perspective is valuable. And this is where we constantly trying to look for validation in other people because we do not believe we actually exist. We don't believe we are valued or valuable in of itself. And we are constantly wanting to be looked at and seen and have our own internal reality model validated by others. Why, we like compliments. We like being seen as, however we see ourselves. That's what makes this deception so difficult. The point of my ego audits are to help people see through their own deception. And it requires a certain level of trust, both in themselves, but also as me, as somebody who is pushing people to stretch what they believe is true about themselves. This is the highest level move in a way, to take your own viewpoint and take it seriously for what it is, but then also always be in the lookout in the ways your own limited perspective is trying to deceive you. In a way, it is reality that all the time deceives itself into different perspectives. That's the only way any of this can exist, because if there wasn't a different mode of perception for each different person and each different animal, then reality wouldn't exist in the way we know it. We would just have this giant blob. Like, what does it mean for something to exist without a perspective? It would be everything and nothing at the same time. It is absolutely unfathomable. So in a very real way, deception is entrenched in the nature of everything that exists. But also, since everything is itself so fully, there is no deception at all, and all that you are coming in contact with is raw, natural truth. Now, if all of this seems kind of confusing still, and you want to dive deeper into how exactly I'm thinking about the stuff, especially when it comes to terms of contradictions, then I would check out my Substack, where I'm going to dive way deeper into these topics. And I also have some amazing announcements to make that wants to make all of the stuff practical and actually empower people to live a better life. Now, if all of the stuff didn't appeal to you, then I have this video to recommend you next.